Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Through the Fire and the SBN Small Business Network podcast. I am your host, Ryan Wickline, and today we are joined by a very special guest. He is an author and consultant, Mr. Larry Onan. How you doing today, Larry?
I'm doing great, Ryan. Thank you for inviting me on today to visit with your audience and you.
Yeah, I saw your background, and I kind of wanted to dive a little bit more into what you do, and I thought you had great insight to the audience.
Well, Ryan, my life experience is over a number of years now. People look at me and they think you're talking to an old guy. I guess I am at 82, but I sure don't feel near that. So I've been blessed with good health, and I just spent 2 weeks in Hawaii with 6 of my grandkids, and so I'm coming back from sun and doing nothing. But Ryan, the story goes back even. I'm a preacher's kid from way back in the 1940s. I was born in 1944. A preacher's kid back in those days was almost an enigma in town because they were the kids that had to behave whether they liked it or not. And my whole religious experience back in those days was very performance driven. So my whole life was around how you acted, what you did, the length of your hair, the length of your cuffs on your shirts. Everything was about the better you looked, the more religious you were. And that was a life of confusion to me because I never could see that in what they were preaching from, but I could sure see that in what they were delivering to the people. And it was actually, I was a freshman in college when I was invited to do a stage show with the director of our stage at my school. And I discovered that by acting in plays, I could be somebody else than I wasn't in real life. And so I took on this idea of theater. I was in numerous shows. I loved the directing aspects of it, got into the background, the technical parts, and I knew I was going to end up in either Hollywood or New York City and Broadway. And I really started thinking that way, that was a craft that I wanted to work and know. So my whole life was, I thought was a straight line toward the greatness. And then I started discovering along that trail that life is not a straight line. It's full of curves. And those curves are what people are not expecting. And if you don't know where you're going, you don't know how you're going to get there. For instance, I live in Southern California, and if I was to drive to Dallas, Texas, I would have to start heading east on Interstate 10 or Interstate 40. And if I'm going to go to Seattle, I'm going to go north on Interstate 5. I can't get to Dallas by going north on Interstate 5. I end up in Seattle because I've chosen a direction to take. And as much driving as I hope to get to and heading towards Seattle, I'm never going to get to Texas. There are two different directions. And I think many people in life do not know where they're going. So they become almost like they're a bumper car experience in a carnival. They're just being jarred around by what comes at them next, or what sale is on, or what the romantic relationship was like last week, or what happened in their job during the week that turned them off and they wanted to leave and go someplace else. So my life was kind of like that. I was a bumper car experience, but it was all about theater, and I was bumping around in that world. And then I started realizing life is more complicated and a mess. I was watching really good people go through really bad things, and that didn't quite make sense. It wasn't how they were dressed. Now it was about real life and what was happening to them. The theme of your show is Through the Fire, and I was watching people around me, peers and adults that were going through fire, and they didn't know how to get out of the fire. So they were standing in the midst of this mess and thinking, how in the world do I ever get through this? And many of them failed completely because they never could figure out how to get out of the fire. But in my experience, I was a junior at the University of Colorado when I started realizing one day I went to a theater class and realized that the 15 or 20 students in there were all acting like I was, but we were now learning to act 24/7. We were not our own selves. We were taking on personalities, and I started thinking, this is not for real. There's something wrong here. And it was really in the midst of that I started to figure out who I was. I was pretty lonely and pretty depressed about the whole thing. Many people go through those kind of experiences. And I ran into three engineering students. One was working on, eventually he went to work for Boeing and worked on the SST, the high-speed jets and stuff like that. Great guys, but they really had a relationship with God in a very personal way. And I could not believe engineers could even think that way. And they couldn't believe that they even liked a theater arts major because there's such dichotomy between the two. But those guys really turned me on to a different way of what I could see my faith could be. And through a series of a number of weeks, I decided I was going to get out of theater, but I had to still graduate. And that took me down a road. I was a first left curve because I was never planning on leaving theater. And I went to some counsel there at the University of Colorado. And I said, how do I get out here in 4 years, but not major in what I'm majoring in? And they said, well, you can't do it in the school you're in. But if you move to the School of Education, you could become a speech coach, a drama coach, a theater arts. You could do English. You'd be a certified teacher in the state of Colorado. We need more people like you in this world. So I changed my whole major and became preparing to be a teacher. And I never went into teaching after that, but that was how I escaped from school. But I think what happens along the way, every day we run into experiences that throw curves at us. And I think the curves are what cause us to grow the most. It's when you are in a undecided situation that you may be more pliable to an experience of spiritual growth, of physical growth, of maturity. And so I think when people say, I don't like change, they are resisting what they really probably need to survive in life. Life is not easy. It is a series of changes that cause you to refocus yourself, reevaluate yourself. And that's what happened to me. I was going through that particular experience. So, change, I look at change really as something that I need to embrace because it's going to happen anyway, and you might as well get adjusted to it. It's too easy on a piece of paper to draw you a map and say, if you'll just drive this direction, straight line here so far, and then you turn left, then you turn right. Maps that have left and right turns on them are not real maps because the curves are always there. And it's how you're navigating the curve gets you where you're at, not just the direction you're going. So, I tell people all the time, embrace the curves, man, because they're going to come at you, and then learn how to take that curve correctly. I was driving in one of the curvy roads of Hawaii just this last week, and I had to slow down to 15 miles an hour to get around one of the roads. That meant I had to obey the sign to get around this particular curve. Now, the whole road was 25 to 45 miles an hour. In Hawaii, you don't travel fast on any road. But there was one place that was down to 15. And I knew if I didn't slow down, I would not make the curve. And I was really glad when I came out of that curve that I obeyed the sign because it was a real hairpin. Now, it was still getting me where I wanted to go, but I had to learn to get around that curve because that was a part of my life experience for that particular road. That was what I was given. So I think sometimes people are trying to make life too easy. I have two grandsons, one's 19, one's 23, and they think that the straight line is their future. Last week, they're very excited. One wants to be teaching at a doctoral level in college, and he thinks and I said, don't be surprised if you don't end up doing that. I said, because you might not be doing what you think you're doing. Now, you're preparing correctly, no doubt about that. But life is not going to take you always to where you want it to go. And then I shared with him, probably in my career of the last 50 years, I think I've been fired or abruptly changed in my job responsibility 4 or 5 times. And I never once volunteered for it. It happened in the circumstances of my life. Now, I could have been negative. I could have fallen apart. I could have been retaliated toward the situations that have occurred. But when I realized those particular options there were preparing me for what I really was supposed to do, then I start to think all the time, that is what life really is. Life is opportunities, taking those opportunities and then learning to adjust to the new realities that face there. Probably the most recent thing that people have know me pretty well have seen about a decade ago, Ryan, my wife died of a glioblastoma brain tumor. Now that's the same kind of a tumor that Bo Biden died from, or Ted Kennedy died from. It's a lethal diagnosis. They can do surgery and they can remove it. It's a tumor, so you can remove a great deal of it, but you cannot remove all of it because they cannot get into the folds of the brain to find the tentacles. It's like a jellyfish with long strings into it. And the tumor does not get into the brain itself, but it gets down into the folds of the brain. And if you hear of anybody with a glioblastoma, you know it's terminal. In fact, if you go to Mayo Clinic or Johns Hopkins and look it up, they'll tell you a glioblastoma, GBM, they'll say this terminal disease is treated in the following ways. Both of the sites use those kind of terms. Well, that's a radical change when you've been married 45 years. Something's going to happen in the very near future. Now, the near future could be 3 to 5 years or 2 to 3 months. So they don't really know what the span is. But if you see that as a change of address for the person, rather than something that I've lost completely, then it makes a radical difference to how you choose to live your life after that. After that experience, I had friends that said, Larry, I'm here for you when you collapse and when you're a basket case, or they were using other expressions. They were trying to be helpful to say they would be around. I never hit that because I chose not to go that route. I chose to say, okay, this was a good season of life. It was a surprise. I don't want to wish it on anybody, but I'm here and she's gone. Now I choose to make a new list of my wills and my commitments. And Ryan, and one thing I've learned in life, I think I hear them talk a lot, but I say, it doesn't exist until you write it down. And so I think people need to realize that your brain can give you all kinds of trips and dreams and concepts, but if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. So if you want it to exist, then start putting things in writing so you can work on that particular written commitment. And in my life, I periodically I go back and I evaluate them. Right now, I've got 10 commitments and I got 12 I wills. And I periodically look at those because as a person, I've got to remind myself of what I'm committed to and what I choose to do versus what I don't choose to do. And so, my life experience is tied around things that I'm choosing to do. The book I wrote, Intentional Living and Giving, has got one word that's very important in that title, and that's the word intentionality. Because intentionality is saying that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go today and mow the lawn, or I'm going to go take care of this particular task. And if I just think about it, I may or may not do it. When I put it before me in a list, I start checking off what I'm going to get done today. Now, if I don't get everything done, I can move it to a different day. There's nothing magic in that. But the fact that you've written it down and you're working on a plan that you've got in front of you that's in writing, and it could be just phrases, 10 steps or 10 or whatever it is. But the point of it is it allows you the opportunity to edit and make adjustments. I can say to myself, I don't really want to do that anyway today, but I'm making an intentional choice not to do it rather than to do it. So when I came back yesterday from an overnight flight from Hawaii, I started working on the list for today. Part of it was commitments on a calendar. Part was some things that you got to do when you've not been gone. You've been around for a couple of weeks. And I'm not going to get everything done. I'll probably get 80% of what I started off to doing today done. But it's a choice that I've made that I will work on my commitments. I will be intentional in my life. So I get up every morning and I said, I've learned to stretch my ankles before you get out of bed. For some reason, you need to do that more at 80 than you did at 40. And as I'm sitting there sometimes stretching and getting ready to get up, I think, okay, Lord, what in the world do you have in store for me today? What's in the to-do list? And how can I help somebody else thrive while I'm learning to also thrive today. That's almost a prayer type of experience. What that does is it starts to focus me on today, not yesterday. And I can take you back to 2 days ago on a 6-hour hike that I did in some of the most beautiful land in the world in Hawaii. But that's over. That's behind me. That's a memory. I've got things I've got to get done today. I've got people I've got to relate to. When I was in business, I was consulting. And I was working with top leadership in nonprofit organizations, and they all needed to raise funding. And my job was to come alongside as a paraclete. I was a process consultant. Not only would I help them figure out what they needed to do, but once we figured out the plan, I would help them go through the process of implementing the plan. So I was a coach and a mentor after I became the consultant to figure out the plan. And over again, it would be, I don't know what's going to happen today, but today I'm going to do X, and I'm going to try to work through this list, and I'm going to try to help these people do this. And then at the end of the day, you can say, I got a lot done today. It was a good day because I was using my giftings. I was using my interaction with people. Life goes on. So I think life has got to be intentional. If you're going to spend your time in the bumper cars, you better not do it more than 5 or 6 minutes in the ride, because it's going to jar you to pieces. And I just don't think people need to live in that particular environment too long. I know it's going to be there, and there'll be times when you can't figure out even how to get out of your circumstance. But there's ways out if you are intentional in how you go about doing it. But anyway, it gives you a little bit of my overall scheme and thought. It's been a real blast to live my life.
Yeah.
But I think many times people think, okay, I'm going to survive today. And I think, why survive when you really can thrive?
Yeah. So you talked about a little bit about you wrote Intentional Living and Giving. What inspired you to write it?
Well, it goes back over 40 years. Ryan, I was working for one of the large international Christian nonprofits. It's in 190 countries of the world, and I was quite involved in some of their leadership. But that organization started with about a few years before this, actually, when I was assigned the task. I'd gone through one of those experiences. I was in charge of the music component, and I was producing albums for music groups that were traveling. I thought I was in my realm because I was using theater arts, and I was turning something into nothing, or something from nothing into something, I guess you might say. And I thought I would be doing that for the rest of my life. And I was at a very large event with 80,000 people, and I was managing the stage show because I knew most of the musicians that were using of that. I'd recruited over 48 different music groups to come into Dallas, Texas years ago. But I'd picked the really good ones to perform in the large event. And then the day before the event started, they realized nobody was there to manage the stage. And they said, well, you've got theater background, you've got the management, you also know all the players that we've already recruited. You're in charge of managing the stage show. So everything that went on the stage that made the show look good to 80,000 people, I was responsible for making sure it happened. And out of the corner of my, off to the side was an orchestra that we created for that event. And all of a sudden I heard that the guy that was leading the orchestra was the new international director of music. And I thought, I just lost my job. I'm on stage and that's my job. And I just heard them announce a new director. And that was kind of a jarring experience because they had not got to me to tell me that they had made that decision yet. Their excuse was, we didn't know where you were, but they'd assigned me to be in the Cotton Bowl that night. So anyway, that took me through a curve, but it was 90 days later that I was asked to come into an office of a guy that had a problem. He'd brought back 48 boxes of pledge cards from that same huge event. Pledge cards that were made mostly by teenagers, 80-some thousand teenagers were there. And we discovered through the process of doing the follow-up that many of them made commitments for their parents, not really commitments that they could commit to. But anyway, we had 28 boxes of pledge cards worth about $2 million. And that back in this particular time, that was a pile of potential money, but they'd gone into boxes, literally, Ryan, and it had been shipped back to the headquarters, and it set in a bathtub, because the offices were converted bathroom or bedrooms. And so the great place to store things was always in the bathtub with a shower curtain pulled over it. And the guy took me to the bathtub, and he said, "Let me show you something." He pulled back the shower curtain, and there were 28 boxes stacked in the bathtub, clear up to the ceiling. And he explained what it was. I do remember it happening, but I never thought I would have anything other to do with news on the program. And he said, "They've been sitting here in my bathtub now for almost 3 months. And I don't know if there's any value in these pledges now or not, but could you and another guy that was working with me, I met him about 15 minutes before, could you two guys take these boxes and see if we can't turn this commitment into some reality?" And that introduced me to the concepts, little did I know, of fund development for nonprofit organizations. And the two of us hauled those boxes to another room, started opening them up, and we said more than once, what in the world did we get ourselves into? There was no guidebooks, there was no guidelines, there was no process. Nobody knew what to do with anything. And the two of us started figuring it out. Fortunately, over a 9-month period, we collected over $2 million from those pledges because we started using technology. We started using computer databases and things of that nature from that. But that took me down a road of becoming quite successful in raising funds. But Ryan, there's a real difference in fundraising today and what I call fund development. Fundraising is always around an exchange. So tonight, if you turn on the television, you'll probably see an ad from a hospital that wants you to give to the needs of a children's center. That's very common out there. You'll find them, or you'll find the need in Israel, or you'll see something, as a commercial. Every one of those commercials are offering a need, but they're going to give you something in return. It's often a plaque, or it's often a card, or it's a T-shirt, or it's a blanket. Every fundraiser has got an exchange involved. You do this for me, and I'm going to do this for you. And hopefully the exchange is of value to where you will want the blanket or the T-shirt or the card or the book, whatever it is. But fundraising has always got this loop in it. You'll hear guys go play golf for charities, but they play golf because they like golf, not because they like the charity. And if I encourage you to come and play golf with me, I know in 3 or 4 weeks, you're going to have me come play golf with you. And you're going to create the environment, but you're not really thinking about the charity. You're thinking about, I get to play golf again with my friends. So that's fundraising, and there's nothing wrong with it, but it's always an exchange. And I was getting good at fundraising, and we were making some good successes. We were finding the right ways to trigger people's interest. And I was so successful at that particular time with my team growing around me that I was invited to a meeting about a very significantly huge campaign to raise $1 billion. And I didn't really belong there. It was not in my cup of tea, but my success was there. And I was probably the most organized from doing the fundraising aspects. So I sat there and I was listening to some consultants say this money can be raised. It will take you probably 3 to 5 years to do it. It's going to take these kind of structures. But they made a comment, unless you can teach people biblical stewardship, you're not going to raise the money. You're going to create competition in the marketplace. And there was quite a heated discussion. I didn't say a word. I just sat there and thought, I don't know why I'm doing here, but I won't get into it, put my 2 cents into the hopper. And a guy that day said, let's assign this task of figuring what this means to Larry here and let him come back and tell us how that should happen. And I think the tactic, as I look back on it, was a ploy to get out of the conversation and assign it to somebody else. No one ever asked me 2 to 3 weeks later, how are you coming on your assignment? I was assigned it. The conversations went other directions. There were some decisions made. But my task, and I remember writing it down, Ryan, on a yellow pad of paper. I can see that pad even clearly in my mind today. Figure out what biblical lifestyle stewardship is. And at the bottom of the page, I wrote the phrase, and Larry, you've got the freedom to fail. Now, I had a mentor that had told me that many times. And he says, the only way you try things out is by being willing to fail, because if you're not willing to fail, you're not going to do anything. And I wrote that down on the pad of paper, and that was all it was on the yellow pad, beside probably some doodling that I was doing. And about 3 or 4 weeks later, I said, I need to get my team of leaders together, and we need to figure something out here. Whether they really want it or not is immaterial. What I want to do is, I did not know what the answer to the question was. And so I got my leadership together, and we picked out 4 or 5 team members to work with me on it. And over a period of a number of weeks, we formulated what we think would be a very solid, biblically grounded, focused direction on what lifestyle stewardship is. Stewardship is not about money. It's about management. It's leadership management on behalf of the one that owns it all. And so the book of Intentional Living and Giving unpacks what lifestyle stewardship is. We radically changed what we did and raised tens of millions of dollars over the next decade. And again, they continue to use a lot of those principles even in that organization today. But it was because we had the foundation figured out. And my role in the consulting world of helping nonprofit organizations was I was trying to help them get away from fundraising, which is survival, to fund development, which lets the organization begin to thrive. So when I was in Ireland about 3 or 4 years ago, with helping a group of all Europeans. I was the only American there, and we had celebrated a guy's retirement, and then we had a 4-day retreat. And one of the guys from one of the Eastern Bloc countries commented, "It's so hard to find information on what real stewardship is. I wish somebody would write something for us that way." And I didn't say anything then, but I thought to myself, that's all you ever did. It's time for you to repackage what you were teaching 30 years ago and get it relevant for the younger generation, the Zs and the younger ones in their 30s and 40s. Because even today, there is a real gap of understanding, and many people are trying to contrive or trying to manipulate, trying to get money from people that don't want to give it. They're asking for way too small amounts when people have got capacity to do much more. And so at the very foundation, although it's not about money, it sure definitely impacts a person that has money. And when that person starts to realize that they don't own anything, they may be a billionaire, but they don't own a bit. They've only been entrusted by the sovereign God to have that resource. And so they are stewards of his resources that he's entrusted to them. And when you see that you don't own anything, and yet you're responsible for managing it, it changes the trajectory a great deal. And it's about, how do I make this money do the right things? How do I make my time, my skills, my abilities maximized, rather than, falling across, thinking I own it all and it's all mine, that I can do what I want to with it. Even in the nonprofits, I say, to the executives, the leadership, this is not your money and it's not their money. Every single dollar you get into this, whether it's Samaritan's Purse or World Vision or Salvation Army, that is not your money. You're entrusted to use that money wisely for the purpose of which it was given, but it's not yours. You don't have free hand to do what you want to with it. You've got to be a wise steward of handling that money. So Intentional Living and Giving is really a guidebook to thriving in life and managing everything: your time, your resources, your skills. And of course, there's a chapter on money. It's 19 chapters. And I did step into one chapter and talk about how do you deal with the subject of money. There's over 100 different things that people can give right now. And one of those 100 would be in the money category.
Yeah.
So that's what it's all about. The whole book is a guidebook to thriving in life and discovering the joy of abundance. And we can have abundance, but it's not our stuff just to play with. I think we have a view of possessionship, and it's not our possessions in the first place. Ryan, I own a house. The state of California makes me pay taxes. But I know I don't really own a house. I've been entrusted to live in a house. And yes, legally, it's assigned to me as a steward to manage it, and they're going to tax me for it. I have an SUV, same thing. It's not my car, it's his car. I get the privilege of driving it. It's got 300,000 miles. I'm amazed at what these Lexus 470s can do. I'm very proud of that car. But it's pride because it's doing a good job, not because I own it.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Yeah, I think if we can just get people to start to realize they don't own it, and then there's some other principles go along with that. But that's
good luck with that one, though.
What's that?
Good luck. I'd say good luck with that, though, getting everybody to agree with that, because there's a lot of people who don't agree with that. They think everything is theirs.
Well, the world system says it's yours. The world system teaches us to think it's mine, and I will take it, and I will take advantage of it, and I possess it. That's the world system. And a biblical system is saying, no, you got to realize who owned it in the first place. He's entrusted it to you, but he's not lost it. And I think there's a New Testament parable about different guys that were in. The owner gave them money, and one of them went out and invested it well and made tenfold, 100% fold, made all the money back. Another one didn't quite do as well, but he made good investments and got quite a bit back. It was the guy that felt like he owned it or didn't know what to do with it that buried it and then brought back exactly what he had. And he was the fool in the story because he refused to recognize his responsibility to the possession to the one that entrusted him with it while he was gone. And I think we just need to look at, and there's gobs of biblical illustrations, Old and New Testaments are full of it. And there's many people in life that have learned to live this way. Ryan, there was a guy that had been very successful in a business in North Carolina. And he came to a seminar that I was teaching one weekend for executives. And he was all excited. He had just sold his business. And he was deciding for the rest of his life, he wanted to do, quote, full-time ministry with executives. And he came to a 5-hour seminar that I was dealing with the same subject back some years ago. And at the end of the session, he came up to me and he said, I came here with an intention to do what I thought would be fun. But after hearing you and going through this process in the last 5 hours, I do know in my stewardship capacity, because he now saw himself as a steward, is I'm good. He said to me, I'm good at making money. I'm good at multiplying. And I'm not going to do what I think would be fun to do, but I'm going to start a new business so I can give all the proceeds away. And he went back and he took his investment that he had made for many years, and it was significant, started a new company and made many millions of dollars over the next 5 to 6 years. And then I saw him after he retired the second time. He sold the business at a significant profit and gave a lot of that away too. He says, I don't need any of it. I just know that I'm good at making it. And he said, but I do want to spend the next few years just doing what I've always wanted to do. And I'm going to go into helping executives doing other things. So he retired the second time, and then he did, quote, his ministry that he'd always wanted to do. But what he had learned is that God had wired him in such a way that he was good at making money for the kingdom. And he recognized that, and his second business was 95% all being given away. And he just thoroughly enjoyed that for 5 or 6 years. And he said, but I'm getting older, and I still would like to try this one more time. So that's when he shifted gears, and I think he was approaching 80 years of age when he made the decision to, in retirement, this is what I want to do it differently. But, the amount of money, Ryan, doesn't really make any difference. Jesus talked about a lady he saw in the temple that gave widows mite the story of the widow's mite. She came and gave all she had. It was two pence, like 2 cents in our economy, a commodity that we're not going to even create in the United States anymore because it costs more to make it than it does to have it. But she gave that, and he commented that this woman had given more than anybody else in the temple, because they were giving a little bit of their portion. She was giving it all. She was just returning it. And so the amount doesn't make any difference. I've been privileged in the years of my past to work with guys who have given multiple millions of dollars to worthy causes worldwide. And when I say multiple millions, I'm talking 138 million, 148 million. One guy outside of the United States made a commitment of 100 million, and his foundation that he's left behind is probably working on the second 200 million. So it doesn't make any difference. The volume is not the question. If people have the capacity to make money, yeah, let them make money. But it could be the average person that just said, everything you've given me today is yours. I just want to spend it right. I want to be a good father. I want to spend time with my kids. I'm going to choose to lay my phone down when I come in the house and not look at it until tomorrow morning. I'm going to focus on my family and my kids. That's stewardship, because that's what's been entrusted to you. Those kids are not yours, they're his. He's entrusted you to raise them. So lifestyle is a lifestyle of managing what's been given to you and thriving because you are taking care of and doing everything on behalf of the owner of it all.
Yeah.
And the book unpacks both the 5 principles behind lifestyle stewardship. This time I did the book in 2 parts. And the second part of the book, after you get through, if you want to call it theology or a biblical foundation, which is very helpful because you start to see things you never saw before. You're going to recognize a lot and you'll get some new insights. The second part is practically, how do you live this life? What are the practical ways you're going to implement what you now know? And then it becomes tips and it becomes guidelines. I'm a strong believer that not everybody is to give to everything. You don't need to feel guilty because you're not giving. A wise steward will say no to things that are not good investments, including saying no to people that are not good investments. So it's not that you have to give every time you turn around. So I have one lady that says, I always carry $10 in my car so I can help the people at the end of the off-ramp. And I thought, you're not really helping them. They're going to buy drugs or going to buy booze or going to do something else. You're not really helping them. There's other ways you can help them more if you help the individuals that are set up to help them. So, sometimes we give to relieve our guilt. Sometimes we give so that we can catapult a new concept that could really help a lot of people. I just want people to be free and not feel, contained and restrained by the world's core systems. The world's core systems is get all you can and keep it all for yourself, and then die with a pile of money that you can't take with you. And that's what a lot of people are living for. And I don't believe it. I don't believe it's unbiblical to not have resources and be in abundance. And it's not bad to be living in a very small substance and having a happy life. The amount's not important to that story.
Yeah. So how can a person find a genuine, lasting purpose in life?
How do they find that? Well, I think many people are struggling with that because they don't have a relationship with God in the first place. When you're not connected to the source, and you may think that God's the great I am, he's the great man upstairs, and there's a lot of phrases that come with it. We are religious in our culture, but that doesn't mean we're personal in our faith. And religious in our culture is going through routine. I was a religious kid growing up because I had to perform a certain way and act a certain way. That is performance. In religious catechisms and other formats, there's things that you've got to do. You've got to show up at certain times. You've got to go confession. There's a lot of things that are built into the to-dos. And you think if by doing the to-dos I've arrived. No, you're just trying your best to show God that you're somehow worthy. that's what happened to me in my college experience. I found students that were like me that had been transformed by a personal relationship with God. And when I really learned how to connect with that, that's what really put me on a different trajectory. So I think and I even go into the book. I take a whole chapter about what really happened to me in college and unpack that for the people, because it was life transforming. I was 20 years of age when I was going through all of that. Now, from the result of that, I changed my direction, and my whole consulting career, everything I've done for the last 60 years has been around what really happened to me back in those days at the University of Colorado, of all places. That was known as the party school of the nation back in my days. It had some very famous locations, and people loved to come there so they could party. But my experience was radically different at the university, because I really realized what personal faith was all about. I came to grips with that. So I think that when a person starts to understand his purpose is related to a person that he may not even know yet, there's a place where you've got to connect and say, okay, God, I really want to know you in a personal way. Now, I have a personal conviction that means it's Jesus Christ is a very key to that. That's God in the human flesh. But the important thing is to connect with him, and then you've got to become schooled in what that lifestyle is. And there's a number of valuable resources that can help anybody. Even when I wrote the book, and on my website, larryonan.com, I provide resources to help people that is not what I wrote, but things that have transformed my life, and other books and other kinds of helps that are all kind of there. I just put them there because I want anybody to find that kind of help. But I think once there's an intentional saying, that's what I want to do, then I think you'll start to see, it's kind of like I will go to Dallas today, and everything I start packing. In fact, right now, I'll take this example. I wrote down earlier today what was still fresh on my mind. If I go back to Hawaii in a couple of years, I'm going to be sure and take the following items. Now, I don't need those items because I love beaching, I love hiking, I love finding new isolated beaches in the middle of nowhere. I'm not going to pack that if I go to Dallas for a meeting. I'm packing something else for that trip. But I think what we've got to do is, when we intentionally decide where we're going to go, we pack accordingly. And so my trip to Hawaii, I packed only shorts. I didn't have dress shirts. I didn't have anything but just a good time with my grandkids. If I go to Dallas for meetings, I'm going to be dressing differently. I'm going to be wearing different attire. I'm going to be thinking differently. I'm going to take my computer. I didn't need to take it to Hawaii. It's those kind of things, because once you decide you're going someplace, there's an appropriate packaging that comes with it. And when I knew I was making a choice to follow the leader of my creation, now I started seeing things a little bit differently, even though it was 5 to 6 years later before I really got into even beginning to understand lifestyle stewardship. That was a pretty radical change for my whole team, because we changed how we did everything. And when we changed how we did everything, we started raising more money because we were no longer looking for money. We were looking for relationships. We were looking for people. We were looking how to bless somebody else, how to be helping them be generous in their thinking. Well, what did that do? It catapulted into more resources being raised for what we were interested in. We were not afraid to ask anymore, because asking is a part of life. Many people don't like the idea of being involved in nonprofits because you have to ask for money. And I've heard people say, oh, I could never do that. I hate the word asking for money. Well, that's a negative view of it. I'm asking people to give because I want to get them involved in something exciting. And if they don't want to, that's fine. I'm not making them give to it, but I want to at least extend an invitation to them. And if they want to say no to it, that's fine, because that is a part of the principle. God's an asker. He wants us to ask. But God's a generous. He wants us to be generous. God used the illustrations. Jesus used a lot of illustrations in Paul, the apostle, in the New Testament about farming, because the culture was very much close to the earth. So when you look in the Bible, you're going to see a lot of things that are very understandable for the people because they understood farming. And farming has got a process to it. I've got in the backyard of my property an orange tree. And that orange tree produces one harvest a year. And it starts with buds in January. And it's probably January of next year before we're going to see any oranges on that tree. But if you don't take care of that tree, it's going to have problems and it will stop producing oranges. You've got to water it correctly. You've got to fertilize it correctly. It's wasting 11 months of the year, not me being able to have an orange. But I'm taking care of the orange tree because I want to see the harvest produce. So we need to kind of think through, okay, there's a process to this. It's not instant gratification. It's not going through McDonald's or it's not going through a fast food joint. That's a different world. And I've heard people complain it took me too long in McDonald's. How long did it take you? Well, they were slow by 5 minutes. We are common in our culture to want instant gratification. Instant gratification is not promised. The Old Testament and New Testament uses the terms in the fullness of time. Or you'll find a God telling people he's going to do something and it takes him 35 years to do it. We're talking about a different thing. God takes his time to do what he wants to do. And then God wants me to be abundant in supplying it with everybody else. So there are 5 core principles that are tied into my lifestyle stewardship. But once they're tied in, and once you start to see those, and then how do you properly be the steward once you recognize you are a steward? So the book does help a person. It's a guidebook in that regard, but it's a practical tool. It's just something practical that says, okay, maybe that's going to help me move from surviving to thriving. And that's really the goal behind the whole thing is, can I help you, Ryan, or your listeners, anybody out there, learn to thrive and not just exist?
Yeah.
Because existence was not the plan of your creator. He didn't put you here by mistake and is waiting for you to die so he can put you in a box. That is, he put you here with an intentional reason that you're here. There was no mistake made. Yeah. So if I'm not a mistake and I'm here for a purpose, I need to figure that out. And then I need to do things like writing things down. It helps me. That's a tool that helps me. It does not help my Heavenly Father. In fact, it's interesting. People think that God was always wanting money. The book of Deuteronomy, one of the 5 books of the Old Testament that Moses wrote, in Deuteronomy, it's interesting that God says, I don't need your money. This is a Onan paraphrase of it. I don't need your money, but I need you to learn to put me first in all things. In other words, God is not going broke because he gave you something. First of all, he trusted you to it. He didn't fully give it to you. But God is not needing it to survive. I'm needing to have you trust me. And if you give resources to what I think is important, then you're learning to trust me with those resources. So you need to learn to trust me. That's what it's all about. Yeah. So how can people get a hold of you? Go ahead. Sorry.
How can people get a hold of you?
Well, there's probably the easiest way you can understand the story that I'm talking about, Ryan. With Intentional Living and Giving, you can buy it through Barnes & Noble. You can get it through Amazon, Million Books, wherever you buy books, whatever your favorite flavor is out there. Intentional Living and Giving. The glance of it here, this is it. That's what it looks like there. Intentional Living and Giving. So if you see that juicy fruit gum look, yellow and blue, that's what that's all about. You can go find that, and for just a few bucks, you can get into the content of what that's all about. That will transform your life. It will transform other people's lives. I've had grandparents and parents give it to their kids because it's written for the younger generation as much as the older. And sometimes a book can help them think more than a parent can preach. Yeah. And if you're concerned about your family and members that are kind of just shooting off the hip and they're wasting it, try to get them into something that would help them start to refocus their direction. That's one way. There is a LarryOnan.com website that you can go on to. You can get the book there if you want signed copies, but most people don't care about signed copies. They just want to get to the content. And then I blog on there. I also put podcasts like our conversation here, which is available there because I'll drop it into that particular slot. There's a whole section on other resources that can help a person begin to be a thriver. So there's a lot of content there, and everything that's recommended is stuff that I personally worked with. So I don't put stuff out there just because there's a name to it. It was transformation on my life. It's helped other people, and so I'm passing on that thought to other people. So LarryOnan.com. The only thing about LarryOnan.com is you can't use the apostrophe there in my name, because you know how computers don't like characters, and the apostrophe irritates the dickens out of your search engine. But
yeah, and I'll drop all that stuff in the show notes too.
Yeah, well, that's what it's all about, Brian. So, the essence is, anybody that's listening, if they think they're confused and not thriving, there's a way. And it's a clear path, but it's a decision that somebody's got to make.
Yeah.
But I think most people think, well, there's more in life and I'm missing it. How do I get it? I think there's a lot here that might be really helpful to them.
Yeah. Is there anything we haven't covered that you'd want to talk about?
Well, we've covered. I just encourage people to not live life in confusion. There is no reason for anybody to live in a depressed state. There's no reason for a person to think this is a lost cause. And I know there can be mental illness and other things that contribute to some of those feelings. But by and large, most people are just confused. And if they can get the right roadmap and decide where they want to go with that roadmap, there's a new life out there. Abundance is a reality. Not abundance because you got a lot of money, but abundance and the feeling that you've got at the end of the day that you're contributing to the life of other people. So, that's what I'm hoping people can get. If they're wanting to get anything from Larry Onan, that's it.
I love it. Final question. What is one piece of advice you'd like to leave our listeners with about overcoming adversity?
Overcoming adversity. First of all, adversity is there to help you. Accept it. Tell yourself, this is a part of the curve that's going to help me become a better person as a result. Because around that curve is another curve, and there's a future out there. So don't be satisfied with living in complacency and depression. Look at life as an experience and a journey that's been given to you by a great God. And that's about it.
I love it. Great advice. Larry, I can't thank you enough for coming on here and giving us some of your great insight.
Thank you for the privilege, Ryan. It's been a great time to visit with you. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, guys, that's going to be all the time we have here today. Remember, the only way to get what you want is to go through the fire.
Amen.